Welcome back, everyone, to OpenLine. We are talking with Councilman at Large Bob Mendes. He is also chairman of the Budget and Finance Committee. We're talking about the unprecedented challenges Nashville is going to face as it puts together next year's budget and tries to close out this year's budget. So we set the table with some conversation there in the beginning. Now I'm just going to take some calls. Let's go to the phones. Let's go to Leon. Hello, Leon. Go right ahead.
Leon.
Go ahead.
Yes, I got a couple of questions. I was going to ask, how is Nashville able to give tax breaks to people like the Nashville Yards Project, a lot of the developers who have came and took over the neighborhoods from the people who've been living in them their whole lives? I was wondering, is Nashville getting taxes for people coming, or are they giving tax incentives to the people who come build here? Because it's like Nashville is paying people to come here, but the people who have originally been here are paying away for the people to come here.
Where do you live, Leon? Where do you live?
I live in East Nashville, and it's been regentrified beyond compare. It's hard to even know where some of the neighborhoods used to be. And all the people that used to live here are all in the surrounding counties. So I'm just wondering, when they have an incentive to come here and build and take over the city, are they having to pay any taxes? And is Metro Council lining their pockets with the money of the people who are taking over Nashville and not putting it back into Nashville? I was just wondering, we're on TV so much right before the coronavirus, talk about this is the it city, and everything has a Nashville coalition to it. The only thing that they talked about more that I can equivalent the two is how they keep on talking about the coronavirus every day.
Okay, all right. Well, let's. That's kind of been the discussion we've had for the last few years. Now I feel like the coronavirus certainly is taking us into new and uncharted territory. But you heard the question there, Councilman Mendes. He's concerned about gentrification and incentives and all of that. What is your response there?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things in there that I'd respond to. One is I've been as critical as anybody of economic incentives, and my big gripe is that for too long now, there's not a policy, document, website, pamphlet, post-it note anywhere that says what the heck the city's trying to incentivize, and where we want it to happen and how we're going to measure it. And the reason why people like Leon are mad about it, I think, is because we've had too many years of dealings inside a mayor's office deciding where economic development happens instead of any sort of policy that anybody's ever talked about. The second thing is there is a lot of confusion, and his question points to a great example of just deeply confused information that it's the government's fault. But Nashville Yards, that property before was owned by a nonprofit, a church, Lifeway, paid exactly $0 in property taxes. And Nashville Yards is going to be a $1 trillion plus development that's going to pay property taxes on every last piece of it. And so from just a revenue point of view, moving from being a nonprofit owned huge chunk of real estate that pays no property taxes to a $1 trillion plus set of buildings is an enormous amount of revenue for the city. That really, that somehow that gets lost because the city doesn't have a good policy for explaining what we're trying to incentivize and where and how to measure it.
Okay. All right, let's go to Randall here. Hello, Randall.
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I don't think it's fair for the citizens of Nashville to have to make up lost revenue by increasing property taxes because of this virus. I don't see why the money can't be rebudgeted and stop wasting it. The leaders of Nashville lured all these companies in here by giving them huge tax breaks. Tax them and increase theirs. They can afford it, not us. Okay.
So he's talking about taxing, I guess, not property taxes, but more corporations or that kind of thing. What about his comment there?
At some point I started keeping a list of all the ideas people had for taxes, because I've heard 15, 20 different versions of ideas, which is awesome. Unfortunately, they all would violate state law. One popular one I hear is that there should be a difference in property tax rates depending on the value of the real estate. So people with lower value real estate could pay a lower rate than expensive properties, sort of a mansion tax. I've heard what are basically income taxes. I've heard, as the caller mentioned, about essentially corporate taxes, and like every last one of those is against state law. Part of the reason why companies move here, part of the reason why a lot of people live here, is that Tennessee is a very low tax environment compared to other states. There is no income tax here. Cities are narrowly boxed into having to fund themselves mostly out of property tax in the state of Tennessee.
So we've taken two calls.
That's the case.
Yeah, we've taken two calls, and they're both adamantly against a property tax increase. You spent the first part of the program, and the mayor's already talked in the past about the dire situation we're in. How tough do you think this debate will be going forward when we're talking about our budget and a likely property tax increase?
Well, it's going to be tough. It's not going to be 100% of people singing "Kumbaya" about this. But I also know we've been through this conversation last year. Last year we had 20 council members vote in favor of a rate increase. We missed by one vote in getting it passed. Of those people that voted for the tax increase who ran for re-election, something like 15 out of 16 of us were re-elected. Of the council members that voted against the tax increase that ran for re-election, 3 out of 4 of them lost. And so it was pretty clear, at least in last summer's election, that being in favor of having the government properly funded, making it so employees could get a fair wage, making sure we had enough services. Council members were not punished last year for being in favor of fixing the budget. And I'm anticipating we're going to have a lot of people unhappy, and we're going to get a lot of emails, phone calls, and that's not fun. But the reality is, honest to God, I don't know what the number is exactly, but if you tried to do the budget with no property tax increase, you'd have to fire multiple thousands of Metro employees. A number where you could have your garbage stop getting picked up, stop having lots of services that we need. There's just not a way to function this city's government without a rate increase this upcoming year.
And in the wonky category, then I'll start taking calls. The reason for that is obviously we've shut everything down, and we get a large portion of our budget from the sales tax, and that has been dramatically reduced. Is that right?
Right, and then you have to, in the same breath, you have to say, and of the 25 largest cities in America, we had the worst rainy day fund by a long margin. If we had even the average rainy day fund of the top 25 cities, this would not be a discussion.
Okay, let's go back to the phones. Let's go to Lee. Hello, Lee.
Well, hello.
Go right ahead.
I'm glad I got to talk to you. I got 2 comments for the gentleman replying to us. Number one, I feel like that the people of Nashville and Davidson County need to take a vote whether we get a sharp increase on our taxes. And then on the second question, well, not a question, a comment, does the mayor realize this? I'm out here on the streets working like any other man. And what I see people talking now that they can't even afford to rent, even if the incentive comes from the president, it's still not even going to begin to pay half their rent. Does the mayor also realize how many people he's going to see put on the street because they can't pay all these taxes because the realtors are going to pass it on to the people? the homeowners. These elderly people are barely holding on to their homes now. They're going to be out on the street and have to take chump change for a piece of property that's probably worth $300,000 and only get $50,000. I mean, you know, he needs to look on the downside of this, because there's going to be a drastic downside on this.
Okay.
It's just common sense. You're going to put people on the street. You're going to make people lose their homes. And are y'all going to develop more affordable homes in Nashville that's not over $1,000?
Right. Okay. Lee, thank you. So Lee is echoing that sentiment that we've heard. And it reinforces what you said. This will be a very difficult discussion. And that was a question I asked earlier. It's a tough time to raise taxes, never a good time, but this is an especially tough time. And that's kind of what Lee is saying right there.
It is, and I don't want to speak for the mayor on this, but I talk enough to him and his senior staff that I think they do realize every bit of what Lee had to say. I think they are literally spending every waking hour through this crisis working on that exact question. You know, the ability to try to get money out of Washington. I know that there are people in our metro government who are thought leaders nationally trying to push the agenda for cities in DC to get some funding to make up for the lost revenue. And you said it earlier, every door has got bad choices behind it. Every door's got a bad result. So I don't diminish in any way what Lee has to say. I think the mayor's literally losing sleep over it. I know I am.
All right, we're going to take a break. We will continue to take your calls. There are a couple of lines open, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Take a break. Be back right after this.